One of the questions that I get a lot is how do you exaggerate a shallow depth of field? In this video, I'm gonna give you a simple 5-step guide. I'm also gonna use a zoom lens to demonstrate. What's up, friends? My name is Pi, and this is my friend, Kiara. We will link her up so you guys can check her out. But look, I got here the new Tamron 28-75 f2.8 lens, a really great lens that I have paired, and it's kind of at a nice price point as well. I want to take this out for a spin, see what it looks like. I'm pairing it with the Sony a7 III. What I want to do in this tutorial is not only do I want to kind of get some images out of this and see what I think, but I want to give you guys a guide on a question and kind of thing that I know new photographers want to do is to exaggerate depth of field. How do you do that? How do you exaggerate a shallow depth of field, especially when you're not using, like, let's say, a prime lens? I mean, when you're shooting at, 50 millimeters, 85 millimeters with a 1.2 lens, pretty easy, right? But I want to give you some basic principles on how to exaggerate that shallow depth with any lens, and yes, you can apply it to primes as well. Obviously, step 0 would be shoot as wide as possible. On this lens, that's going to be f2.8. So let's start with the basics. I'm gonna start with the first thing, which is basically choose a scene that has depth. And let me show you what I mean with this. So what we're gonna do is walk over here, and if I were to take a picture of Kiara, just kind of like right in front of, this hedge. In fact, what I might do is, Kiara, why don't you come down right here and just give me like a little pose right there. You're gonna notice that we're not gonna get a lot of depth in this scene because the scene itself doesn't really have depth. So let me just take a quick shot so you kind of get an idea of what I'm talking about. Right there, cool. And because it's Kiara, it still looks awesome, that's fine. But look, the problem is that we're not gonna have depth here because, well, the scene is only so deep, right? So I can create depth pretty simply by just shifting to an angle where the scene is actually gonna kind of have foreground that leads in and then background that goes behind. So step 1 is to kind of shoot from a different angle where we have depth. And Kiara, come down to that same kind of spot. Come down low again. Right there. Perfect. Okay, so we're at f2.8. And immediately we do start seeing that there's a bit more depth in the shot. Still not great, but that's only step 1 to exaggerating bokeh. So step 2, you like how I said that? Bokeh? Bokeh? Bokeh. The blurry effect in the background. We have fancy terms for this. That one's one of them. A shallow depth. Okay, so number 2 is to backlight the scene, okay? When we have backlighting, we're naturally gonna get more depth and a more exaggerated look. Do I know why? Can I explain it? Probably not, but that's fine. You don't need to know why to do it. So let's go right over here. And now what we have here from this angle is a scene that not only has depth, but then we're also adding backlighting. I'm gonna go ahead and take this shot, and we're at about the same distance from her. And I'm still shooting fairly wide, and notice immediately that the image takes on a very different characteristic. Do I know why that is the case? Not really, but when you backlight and you shoot through leaves that are backlight, the sparkly effects and all the beautiful stuff, it creates that nice jazz and it bounces. You get better shallow depth. That's all that matters, okay? Number 3, I want you guys to understand focal length, distance to subject, distance to background. So look, I'm shooting wide. I'm at 28 millimeters on this lens, right? If I back up to here and I'm shooting wide, you have to understand that you're not gonna get a lot of depth because you're shooting wide, and to see a shallow depth when you're shooting at 28 millimeters standing this far back, I'd have to have a lens that can open out to like f1.2 to be able to get something with a shallow depth of field at this distance. So if I'm gonna shoot wide, what I need to do is close the distance to my subject. So look, as soon as I step up to Kiara right here, immediately we start getting a better depth in the scene. Why? Because we've closed the distance to our subject and the distance to the background becomes longer. All that really matters here is when you're wide, step in close. Okay, the other side of this is number 4, which is if you wanna exaggerate depth and you have a zoom lens, step back and zoom in. So what I'm gonna do now is take this Tamron up to 75 mil. I'm gonna go back, and I can even do the exact same framing. So let me look at the previous image. Let's see. So let's frame right at the thigh like we did on that previous shot, okay? I'm gonna get down right here. We're zoomed all the way in, right there. Dude, I love this lens. It's rendering really beautiful background bokeh. So look at these two. She's roughly in the exact same kind of framing and size in the lens, right? But you can see just how much more exaggerated the background becomes when we step back and zoom in. Okay, so let's add this up. We said number one, obviously, well, step 0 was shoot wide open, right? We all know this, as wide as you can possibly get. But number 1 was start with a scene that has depth to begin with. Choose an angle where there's depth. Number 2 was to backlight that scene, right? To choose an angle where you have backlighting. Number 3 was when you're shooting wide, step in close. Number 4, if you have the ability to zoom, step back, zoom in, you get even more exaggeration. Last one, number 5. I want you guys to try and use some foreground elements. Ideally, those foreground elements should be backlit as well. So what we're gonna do is step into the grass now, and let's go right to this spot over here before we lose the light. Kiara, I want you to stand in that patch of grass. And those of you that are like, he's in the middle of a forest and like we're damaging it. This is like literally my backyard, okay? This is my neighborhood. I pay the HOA here. I can do what I want. I can step in the weeds. Okay, so what we're gonna do now is I'm gonna keep the same zoom. So we're at 75 millimeters, same setting, same everything. F2.8, we're at 1/500 of a second. And now I'm gonna shoot through the foreground right into Kiara. I'm gonna use the leaves to kind of frame out any weird objects in the back. I'm gonna try to get to a spot where I don't see that car. Let's shift our angle a bit. Back it up a little bit. I dig it. It's very simple, but it creates a really great look and aesthetic with that. Just some simple, like all we're doing now is kind of putting it all together, using the foreground, going to the background. I'm gonna get a couple more shots, but that's it. Okay, super simple. So I'm just gonna keep going. I'm gonna do the exact same thing. Let's find another spot to do it. Because the sun is setting, I'm just finding a different angle and a different location where I can kind of do the same thing. Now here I don't have foreground stuff in front of me like this, but I can get her to kind of come down into that grass, and then I can sort of use the grass at a low angle as my foreground and to kind of exaggerate that depth. Again, really beautiful effect. I'm honestly very surprised with how good this lens is. This, you know, but the A7, hopefully the A7 IV's got this fixed, right? It has this weird articulating lens that I can't get into the right. I gotta go old school and get down here. I'm old to do this. I'm too old for this.
Are you getting that angle?
Are you getting my butt? I feel like it's showing. Okay, here we go. Look right here. You're the only one that needs to look good for these photos.
Oh my God.
Right there. How did you snap back to it like so? You're like, oh my.
Well, that's what I do. That's
What I do in photography, she does in modeling.
what I do.
I love that. It's fantastic. I love that with the flare coming into the side. Those look amazing.
You getting my face?
Well, yeah.
Like.
Like what else would I? No, I'm just zooming in on your knee. I'm like, her knee is the shit. So I'm just gonna shoot the knee. I love it. Okay, so that's kind of how easy it is to create depth. So even if you have a zoom lens, you follow these principles, you will create depth. And if you're on a prime lens, you can follow the same principles and exaggerate that depth and create even more buttery bokeh by doing those simple things. And if you're shooting on a prime lens and you follow these 5 steps, you're gonna get, I mean, we're talking like, what is the creamiest of the bokeh? Nutella bokeh. You're gonna get Nutella bokeh, okay? So do it. If you guys like the video, be sure to like and subscribe and do all the stuff that really makes me uncomfortable to say, but hey, if you found it valuable, I'd love for you guys to join us. And we're gonna link up all the gear that we used, including this new lens that I have to say that I am very impressed with. So you can check out the description of the video, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace.